something. But as we mentioned, a very big name and arguably the best name currently on the tennis tour, Carlos Alcaraz on Tuesday says he is out from Wimbledon because of his wrist injury that he suffered at the Barcelona Open last month. Alcaraz will also miss the French Open, saying that his recovery is going well, feeling better, but not ready to be able to play. And so he's out from this summer's Wimbledon tournament. So naturally, this gives Jannik Sinner and some others a chance to capture a title. Meanwhile, Rashee Rice apparently is having to learn the lesson the hard way. He has violated his probation and now has been sentenced to 30 days in jail. The Chiefs wide receiver can't participate in OTAs and even had a cleanup surgery on his knee. He was supposed to miss a couple of months. He says he'll be ready for training camp, but who even knows at this point? The future of Rice cloudy after his suspension and now violation of probation this week. Meanwhile, good news for the New York Yankees. They lost Max Fried, but their replacement's a pretty good one. Gerrit Cole is going to return on Friday to the Bombers. Aaron Boone made the announcement. Last game that he pitched was October 30th, 2024. Yes, that's right. It has been a year and a half since we've seen Cole pitch, and he'll do so on Friday night. Also, big news from the NBA before we get to the score last night. Jason Kidd is looking for a new head coaching gig. He's out as Mavericks head coach, and he's going to be paid for several years despite not coaching. His record, how about this? With Dallas, 205 and 205, 205 wins, 205 losses. They have a new president, Masai Ujiri, and he said that he just simply wanted to make a change. Of course, they fired their general manager after trading Luka Doncic last season. All right, now let's get to it. Last night, this was a crazy finish in the NBA, one of the better games we've seen in years. The Knicks were down 22 points. They come all the way back to beat the Cavs in overtime, and by the way, somehow covered the 6.5-point spread. What a bad beat if you had Cleveland yesterday. Analytically, the Cavaliers had a 99.9% chance of winning with 8 minutes to go. But Jalen Brunson said not so fast. He had 38 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists. Mike Brown and Kenny Atkinson trying to somehow put into words the finish of this one.
I got to give my group credit. They've been resilient all year. And I don't know if I've seen that in a playoff game. I don't know if I've been a part of it. Maybe I have. But to be down 18, 19, 20, whatever we were down, and to find a way to come back and win. I mean, I take my hat off to my group. You know, Cleveland, they were shooting the ball well. They were turning us over. They were getting the ball in the pocket and taking advantage of us. And we just found a way. We found a group of 5 guys that went out there, ended up getting stops and, you know, scoring the basketball.
I thought they hit some really tough shots in that fourth quarter. You know, those 2 threes, prayer threes, end of shot clock. I think we got a little unlucky, quite honestly. You know, Brunson obviously took over at the end, and, you know, we started double teaming them and try to do some different things. But listen, I'm super proud of the way our group played. We played great basketball tonight for, you know, 3 quarters. You know, unfortunately, fourth quarter, you know, they dominated us in the fourth quarter.
That is a fair way to put it. Dominating in the end. Meanwhile, Jalen Brunson, Karl Anthony Towns, they get the Knicks to a Game 1 victory in overtime. Here they were post-game talking about that special feeling.
For all 3 of you, can you talk about what it was like to be a part of what seemed like a May miracle at the Garden?
I mean, you know, it's always special when you give your fans something to cheer for. And for us to, you know, it's been a tough go-around for them for the first 3 quarters of the game. And for us to come in that huddle and, you know, with the energy of the fans and the fans really showing us so much love and support to give them something to cheer for in the fourth, it's always an honor. It's a privilege to be able to do. And, you know, this team, all we want to do is make the city proud and bring the city wins. And to be able to accomplish that tonight in a night where it didn't seem like it was going to happen is an honor. And it's truly something special.
And Gilbert McGregor will be along to preview Western Conference Game 2 coming up in just a few minutes. Meanwhile, a big surprise. Mason Miller apparently is human. The Dodgers beat him yesterday. They came back in the ninth to win 5-4. Andy Pajes hit a sacrifice fly off Miller to beat the Dodgers. And Manny Machado hit a homer. So did Miguel Andujar. So that was picking up the natural slack here offensively. Here is Dave Roberts on Page's sack fly, not slack, but sack fly to beat all-world closer Miller.
I think the work, that he's put in, I think kind of showed itself right there. But I think at the end of the day, it was just fight. It was just will, determination, and, that's why, for me, it's just kind of the compete and not worrying about mechanics and, this and that. It's just me versus you. And it was him versus Mason Miller, and he wasn't going to lose that battle. And Mason's the best in the game right now. And, Andy he willed himself to do something productive in that at bat.
All right, another big story in baseball has to be the red-hot Tampa Bay Rays. Does this team ever lose? I mean, almost never. They beat Baltimore 4-1. They're 32-15 on the season, 17 games above 500, and have won 8 straight series. Richie Palacios 1 for 3 with a base hit, and the Rays are clicking, says Palacios.
8 straight series win, 17 games over 500, 12-2 against your division, Richie. What's allowed this group to click so well?
We've just been grinding, man. We're working and we're pulling for each other. We love each other, putting good at-bats together. Our arms are doing well. Everybody's doing amazing. So we got to stick with it.
The Rays are playing good baseball. So are the Brewers. They beat the Cubs again. Chicago has now lost 4 straight games. Brewers win as road favorites. Jake Mizorowski, 6 innings pitched, 8 strikeouts. He's now up to 24 1/3 scoreless innings. And the Cubs are needing a reset, says Ian Happ.
Yeah, no, I think every year has periods like that. I do think that, if we had the same record we had today, but we just won every single series, it would feel a little bit different, a little bit more consistent. And, there's pros and cons to, winning 10 straight twice and, having the record we have. But I think when you reflect on the whole thing, we're, whatever it is, 12 games over 500 or something like that, and sitting in a good spot. If you would have told us this was going to be a record at this point in the season, I think everybody would have signed up for it. So move on from here and attack tomorrow.
And meanwhile, the A's can't be stopped. Still in first place out west. They beat the Angels 14-6. Nick Kurtz had 3 hits and 5 runs driven in. The Phillies, meanwhile, lost to the Reds by a final of 4-1. It's been all Chase Burns this season. He's been the de facto ace of Cincinnati, 6 innings pitched and 9 strikeouts. Here is Terry Francona on his de facto ace, Burns, in the month of May.
Some days where we've been kind of up against it, and he's gone out there and given us what we needed. Or, he's been really good. He's a young, a lot like Sal. He's good, he's young, and he's learning fast, and we appreciate that.
Stanley Cup Western Conference Finals also continue tonight. It will be Las Vegas and Colorado as they begin Game 1. Naturally, everyone excited to see how the Montreal Habs do in the Eastern Conference Finals, which I believe begins tomorrow night, if I'm not mistaken. Welcome back to Newswire here on Sports Grid. In case you missed it last night, it was a game for the ages in the National Basketball Association as the New York Knicks come all the way back from 20 points down, 22 to be exact, to defeat the Cleveland Cavaliers. The final score last night was 115-104. If you went to bed early, you really missed a fantastic finish. So what happened in this one? Of course, partially due to the success of Jalen Brunson. And Brunson, of course, coming through in the big games, had 38 points, 5 rebounds, and 6 assists. Mikal Bridges had 18 points and 5 rebounds. Karl Anthony Towns with a double-double, 13 and 13. Now, on the Cleveland side, Donovan Mitchell had 29 and 5. But the player in particular that came under some criticism was James Harden, who had just 15 points and also struggled on the defensive side of the ball. But first, let's recap the game and hear from the head coaches, Mike Brown and Kenny Atkinson, as the game went into overtime, and somehow not only did the Knicks win, but they ended up covering the spread. Here's Brown.
I got to give my group credit. They've been resilient all year, and I don't know if I've seen that in a playoff game. I don't know if I've been a part of it. Maybe I have. But to be down 18, 19, 20, whatever we were down, and to find a way to come back and win. I take my hat off to my group. Cleveland, they were shooting the ball well. They were turning us over. They were getting the ball in the pocket and taking advantage of us. And we just found a way. We found a group of 5 guys that went out there ended up getting stops and, scoring the basketball.
I thought they hit some really tough shots in that fourth quarter. Those 2 threes, prayer threes, end of shot clock. I think we got a little unlucky, quite honestly. Brunson obviously took over at the end, and we started double teaming them and try to do some different things. But listen, I'm super proud of the way our group played. We played great basketball tonight for 3 quarters. Unfortunately, fourth quarter, they dominated us in the fourth quarter.
Yeah, no doubt the Knicks were lucky to get that win, but they played great at the end of the game. Let's bring in Sam McQuillan from Legal Sports Report with the very latest on sports betting and prediction markets going on across the United States and abroad. Sam, welcome back to the show. Let's get started with the update in Minnesota. Minnesota says no more prediction markets for us. You got to get out. And the response is the CFTC jumping in. So who ends up winning this battle? Will it be the prediction markets or the CFTC? Because a landmark case could be in store.
Yeah, if I had to pick a winner in this battle, Craig, it would probably be the lawyers on both sides, because they're definitely really busy with all of these fights between the states, Kalshi, Polymarket, and now the federal agency, which is supposed to oversee these companies. Minnesota passed its law, the first law of its kind, banning prediction markets in the state, including sports event contracts, which have become very popular as sort of an alternate method of wagering, especially in states like Minnesota, where sports betting is not legal yet. And Minnesota passed this law effectively banning those platforms from the state. The CFTC responded just 1 day later, filing a lawsuit to block the state from doing that. They called it a flagrant and unprecedented incursion into their regulatory authority. The CFTC has maintained that these sports prediction markets are, in fact, not sports betting, but financial derivatives, which they are supposed to regulate under law. The states don't want these products in their states. So this is what's happening now. You have 6 lawsuits between the CFTC and Minnesota. Whether or not there'll be a winner in that lawsuit anytime soon remains to be seen. It's one of a number of not even those lawsuits, but you also have Kalshi and Polymarket and Robinhood with their lawsuits as well. You've had about 20 states in total kind of take action. So these lawsuits could take a long time to play out. It's believed by many that ultimately the Supreme Court will have to decide on this matter, whether or not these are indeed financial trading instruments or these are actually sports betting products, which the state should be free to govern. So that's the heart of the issue right here. The CFTC certainly has had spent a lot of energy defending its right to oversee these products. We are still yet to see any formal rules from the CFTC actually governing what these products can do. You've had several leagues like the NFL, the NBA, the MLB asking for similar style to sportsbook protections to make sure that you can't offer markets on problematic things like officiating or injury decisions. So it's just kind of another development in this crazy saga we've been talking about now for over a year. And we'll see, when push comes to shove in these courts, but it could take a while before we have any actual real winners and losers and rulings in this whole thing.
Read more at LegalSportsReport.com, including this next story that Sam and I are going to break down, which is, quite frankly, a surprising one to me. If you think back in terms of sports betting, before it was legalized, imagine one of these offshore books, Sam, saying, well, your player got hurt, you can have the money back. And so here we are with potentially the state of New York saying, yeah, that's the way that you should operate. A player gets hurt, you got to void the bet. I am stunned, Sam, to hear this happening, because it sort of, makes it possible for a lot of people to probably place more haphazard bets. And if something ends up happening, they're going to be like, well, I know that I don't have to take a loss here. I am surprised.
Yeah, it's a very surprising bill to pop out of also a surprising state like New York. Whenever they pass a bill or really pay attention to anything in sports betting, other states tend to notice as well. So I'm also surprised, Greg, to see this bill, which would create a formal fair play policy for all sports books to follow in the state, agreeing on situations where bets either have to be adjusted, refunded, or voided, it includes injuries, but is not limited to it. It could also include whether a player is a late scratch in a game, whether the sporting event itself is canceled or suspended, and dealing with statistical errors and stat corrections. Sometimes someone is awarded a rebound who didn't actually get the rebound, or an assist counts as an assist that shouldn't have, those sorts of things. And, sportsbooks already have their house rules, which they write themselves, get approved by the state, and they're required to follow in case any of these kind of situations happen. So it seems like this bill would just create kind of another layer of universal protections that all sports books agree to in the state. But it is very, it's a far departure from the days of, sports books pushing the idea that, if a player gets injured and you took the over on their bet, that's just kind of part of the risk, or part of the risk you assume when placing that bet. We've certainly seen, as sports betting grows, a lot of people pushing for or advocating for the bets to get refunded when injuries happen. And we've even seen some sports books, create their own injury policies where your bet will get refunded if the player gets hurt in the first quarter, or other sports books offer, injury insurance, those sort of things as more promotional kind of ventures. But now you have a state actually focusing on making this part of its law and pushing it on the sports books themselves. So it's not too concrete in how it's developed right now. It's kind of, very, a vague outline of how it would work. So I'm really interested to see how it might develop more throughout, the legislative process in New York, which certainly has a lot of other things on its plate right now. So very interesting that this is one of them.
Sam, let's close it out here with this new potential act called the Game Act, which prohibits social media companies and websites from targeting minors with sports betting ads. Naturally, makes a lot of sense here, but can they push something like this through?
Yeah, that's the big question. We've had a number of laws like this proposed in Congress on a national level to restrict, to better safeguard sports betting, especially advertising towards minors, which is a big concern. Those bills have not really gone anywhere so far. It's been largely messaging actions. This bill would make it illegal for a sports book or a social media company or website to target anyone under the age of 18 with a sports betting ad. How that's actually going to be enforced is a big question, which probably goes into whether or not this will actually get passed. Under the law, the Federal Trade Commission would be tasked with regulating this and overseeing this, but it's kind of hard to tell how they would figure out if an ad was specifically targeted to a minor or not. But hopefully we get some more details as the bill keeps developing through the process. And if it doesn't, it's just another one of those big, messaging platforms on a really important topic right now. So we'll keep watching and monitoring and.
All right, Sam, you're wearing blue, I see, for your Knicks. Good job there. We'll catch up again. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Right.
Dustin Gawker up next. Dustin Gawker is with us. Of course, you can catch his Substack and certainly all of his podcasts and appearances on different networks like CNN Talking Prediction Markets as he covers them. Dustin, great to have you back here on Newswire. My understanding is there was a sports betting and prediction market hearing this morning. So tell us more about the Senate and certainly if there was anything that you learned from it, which seems to be a lot of people feel one way, a lot of people feel another way, and then we just keep moving on with prediction markets being alive.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much we learned from it, but it is interesting. Senate Commerce Committee, one of their subcommittees, held a hearing just this morning, just wrapped up a little, like half an hour or so ago, called No Sure Bets, Protecting Sports Integrity in America. Now, it sounds a lot like a hearing that's going to be about sports betting, right? And it was, and it is about integrity, but most of that hearing was spent talking about prediction markets and how some of the members of the Senate who are on this committee don't really like prediction markets and what's happening with them. That was, I'd say, the overarching theme of this hearing that was going on. And most of the members seem not to like it, right? That is, we saw Senator Ted Cruz kind of equate prediction markets to sports betting. We had folks from Nevada, New Mexico, states that do not like prediction markets, kind of usurping their sports betting industries. They were pretty negative on prediction markets. So the most interesting data point is just that senators are interested in this topic. The answers we heard from the American Gaming Association, we heard from the Coalition for Prediction Markets, and other folks, and not to dismiss what these people say, but we've heard these answers before. They talk about these things. I know the answers before they give them, and that's interesting. But again, the most interesting data point is that senators are talking about this and very concerned about prediction markets in a way that they weren't 3 to 4 months ago. So I listened to this hearing, and the question is, does this become more than just chatter? There's people like to talk about things on Capitol Hill. Does this turn into something meaningful? The Senate has passed a resolution banning senators and their staff from trading on prediction markets, but does all this negative energy and kind of desire to rein all this in, does that turn into material action by the Senate, by Congress. I'm pretty skeptical of that, as always. But again, if we were handicapping this, I would have said no chance, like heading into 2026. And now the Senate and a lot of members of Congress are very interested in this topic. So we'll have to wait and see what becomes of this. But this Senate hearing is a step along that path.
Okay, fair enough. We'll see. All right. So Kalshi apparently has joined the NCPG to become the first financial services and trading category member to advance trader health and safety. But hold on here. I thought that this was for the gaming companies.
I mean, gambling's there in the name, right? It's part of what's the National Council on Problem Gambling does. But Kalshi has found a way to thread the needle to be involved and try to be proactive. And I'd applaud this, right? Kalshi and prediction markets have tried to avoid the gambling moniker as much as possible for legal reasons we've talked about ad nauseum on this show. But they're embracing it and saying, you know what, these things can be addictive, even if it's not quote unquote gambling in the traditional sense, that we should be working on this. So they made a donation of $2 million to the NCPG. They've created a new this new category about financial services. And, you know, again, good. Let's do that, because just saying this isn't gambling is not sustainable. You know, right. It's going up to the line, right? It's not saying it's gambling, but it's partnering with a group whose goal is to help people with problem gambling, right? So I'm not, like, people will poo-poo this, but I'm going to say this is good. That, you know, Kalshi has been resistant, but is trying to do something. It would be great if we just said it's gambling and we're able to admit that, but short of that, I'm not going to say that being involved with the NCPG is a bad thing. So I hope other prediction markets do that. I hope everybody kind of realizes there's harm that can come from this, and that we do something about it and not just kind of wash it away and say, oh, it's just like the stock market, it's investing. It's not those things. It is, the number that we repeat all the time, 85 to 90% right now of activity at prediction markets is on sports event contracts, basically sports betting. And, you know, that there's harm that comes with that, and acknowledging that and dealing with that reality, I think is a really important step.
All right, Dustin, story of the week in sports media, without a doubt. Sports Illustrated, which has certainly undergone some transformations beyond what we could have imagined 5-10 years ago, apparently deleted a writer's profile over some AI plagiarism, which was just crazy. When I read the story, I actually had to read it twice. So tell people exactly what happened here. And as you can see, the accountability seems to be zero, right? At this point, like it's just media, it just goes away.
Yeah, it's weird. And so this intersects with prediction markets because, there's this great story by Dan Bernstein over at Sportico about how much activity is going on at Kalshi around parlays. And he spent a lot of time doing this. He dug into data. This is not publicly available stuff. It came from a lot of research. The data is public, but it's hard to get to. So, like, his story needs to be cited and linked anytime you are doing this. You can't just say, oh, like, this is out there. So anyway, SI, which has been standing up this prediction markets vertical in terms of content, basically just like wrote a whole story about parlays at Kalshi and doesn't at all acknowledge Dan's work, doesn't link to it, doesn't do anything. And then everybody, like, Dan sees this, I see this, because we follow everything that's going on in prediction markets world, and we're like, what the heck is going on here? You gotta cite Dan's work. And so the story goes away. The author's profile disappears, and this becomes a media story now instead of a prediction market story, which is fascinating. Awful announcing, a lot of other futurism, a lot of other outlets pick this up, and this is like part of the downfall, I guess, of SI, is that it used to be a trusted brand, and now it just publishes stuff without citing links and doing all that, which is just terrible for journalism in general. And you and I, who grew up with Sports Illustrated being like the end boss of sports journalism, is now reduced to this, to publishing stuff and not editing it, and just ripping people off, and it's kind of a shame.
It is. All right, let's get to an interesting prediction here for Kalshi, Dustin, as we close it out.
Yeah, we can bet on the weather, right? Craig, is it going to be, how hot is it going to be in Miami? I'm going to place a bet on this right now on Kalshi.
86.
86. 63% of people think it's going to be between 88 and 89 degrees tomorrow. You can bet on lots of weather at prediction markets in lots of major metropolitan areas. We talked about the one in France where somebody was trying to get over on Polymarket. But if you want to bet on something other than sports, you can bet on the weather. It's good fun.
There you go. I'm glad the Marlins have a dome. 86 would not work well for this forehead here. Thanks again, Dustin. I appreciate it. Have a good week. Thanks again.
Cheers, Craig.